Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment, for the Microsoft Surface Book. Now this machine starts at $14.99 US and goes well above $3,000 depending on the configuration you desire. Whether we're talking about the base, which has an i5 ultra-low voltage processor, that is an Intel 6th Gen Skylake chip complemented by 8 gigs of RAM, a 3000 by 2000 res display that you'll get on every single configuration, which covers 100% of the sRGB spectrum, not Adobe RGB, but sRGB. One of the best displays, by the way, that I've seen on any laptop or tablet. Remember, this is a hybrid that with a single long press, I should say, of a button will allow you to detach this 13.5-inch display and use it in tablet mode. There's a battery both in the display as well as in the keyboard. You can see the keyboard is backlit. We have a very large, and I would say one of the best trackpads you'll find on any laptop on the market, definitely any PC. And this is Microsoft's first stab at making a real laptop, although it's still not quite a legitimate laptop in the traditional sense because it is a hybrid that actually does detach. So Microsoft set out with the Surface line of products, specifically the Pro line, to give consumers an option, a tablet that could, in theory, replace their laptop. Here, they've decided to replace your laptop with a laptop, which may sound confusing, especially since they made a hybrid. That would lead me to think if they were going to make a laptop, they should focus on making it exactly that, a laptop. But instead, we got this hybrid, and it's not a bad thing, by the way. It performs very well. Again, in terms of configurations, that base $14.99 model is going to get you 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of internal storage, the SSD size, that is. Basically everything that you're seeing here, but no dedicated GPU. This model is the base dedicated NVIDIA GPU model, which has 256 gigs of solid-state storage, but the same 8 gigs of RAM, the same i5 ultra-low voltage 6th Gen Intel Skylake processor. In terms of everything else, identical. Same battery life for the most part. Microsoft quotes 12 hours. I've been seeing closer to 8 to 10, depending on what you do with the machine itself and where you leave screen brightness. Now, right now, I have screen brightness cranked up completely, 100%. Really wanted to give you a better idea, again, of what the backlit keys look like. A lot of people have complained that there's not enough contrast on them. Well, those are people used to using MacBooks. In my opinion, the keyboard is great. The trackpad is great. Even people who have been complaining, myself included, in my first update about the range of motion that this is able to accomplish with the hinge that Microsoft created, it really is more than enough when you think about it. I mean, unless you require a laptop where you're going to get the screen to go all the way down completely flush, which most users don't need for practical purposes, this definitely covers a realistic range of motion for just about any laptop. Another big complaint about this machine, other than the price point, starting price point, forget the dedicated GPU models like this being $18.99, and for almost $2,000, of course, there are many options on the market that are full-blown laptops rather than ultrabooks that happen to have dedicated GPU solutions like this, which is rare and unique, and as is the 13.5-inch separating tablet upper half, but still a very big premium to pay for this first-gen Microsoft laptop. And that doesn't mean that it isn't the right machine for you. It just means that you have to be sure, because there are a lot of different laptops these days, a lot of good options to choose from. So the Surface Book, while it does have great build quality, solid battery life, and again, one of the best displays complemented by very good speakers, it's not the only option out there. In terms of pricing, again, that's probably the Surface Book's biggest weakness, because as I try to connect to Wi-Fi, meanwhile, I'm saying it's its biggest weakness. The question is, did my network drop during the course of this review? Apparently, the 5 gigahertz channel is not cooperating, so I'm going to have to go ahead and input. Well, let's actually try it too. I haven't been using the 2.4 gigahertz. Let's see if I can get this to work. Let's go for a troubleshoot. But back to what I was saying, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a machine that matches this in overall quality, performance, and form factor. Granted, at a little over 3.5 pounds, it is heavier than I would have liked. for a hybrid. If it was a full-blown laptop, then that weight class to me would be slightly more acceptable, but still very impressive that they were able to pull this off in this form factor. A lot of users have complained about it being top-heavy since all of the components are actually inside this part of the laptop, the tablet portion, if you will. The only thing inside the keyboard is the battery in the base model, and then of course if you do get the dedicated GPU option, then you will have the NVIDIA dedicated GPU in here. So anytime you separate the tablet, you will lose the actual NVIDIA connection, or rather the NVIDIA GPU benefit. So that's something to keep in mind. Let me go ahead and enter my password here because apparently the Wi-Fi has cut out, and even though I have not used the 2.4 gigahertz band, you're going to see it in action right now. I'm not sure what's going on with my 5 gigahertz channel, but we're going to rectify that either way. So here comes the machine back on screen, and we're now connected. And I'm going to go ahead and test that by just reloading the Microsoft website. And you can see no problem at all. Scrolling very smooth. And this trackpad, I have praised it enough. There's a reason it's very good. When it comes to content consumption, the machine is fantastic. You've got a full-size SD card slot, 2 full-size USB 3.0 ports. So very similar to what you'd find in an Ultrabook of this class. No Ethernet port, which I wish there was for those of you who say, well, you can get an adapter. An adapter's a bottleneck, folks. If you really need as much hardwired speed as possible, an adapter is simply not going to deliver what a traditional Ethernet port will. In terms of configurations, you can see that base config I was mentioning before right there. I would say I could pinch to zoom, but I'm not inside Edge, so I will do that on screen. And you can see right there clearly $14.99. Nets you the i5 with 8 gigs, 128 gig SSD. You can step up to the 256 gig model, still no i7 or dedicated GPU. And then, of course, the dedicated GPU model I'm reviewing right here, $18.99, which I think if you're curious about its gaming capability is really the only option. The i7, not really justifiable, even for what appears to be a negligible price difference. But then if you want to jump all the way up to the 1 terabyte model, you're looking at $3,200, which I'm not even going to get into what that could buy in the desktop world or in the laptop world because it's kind of absurd. Now, the whole reason I have the lights low, for those of you that have been wondering, is because I wanted you to see what the machine would look like in low light performance. I've already shown it in both the update and my unboxing in terms of what it looks like in natural regular lighting. This is what it's going to look like on the road when you bring up that backlit keyboard and actually have to work on it in situations that are not traditional. But when it comes to web browsing, this is a powerful machine, have no doubt about that. Even though it's an ultra low voltage chip and not a traditional i5 or i7 6th gen processor like you can find in Dell's brand new XPS line, it's still extraordinarily competent with most pieces of software. So if you need to run Adobe, Photoshop, AutoCAD, even do video editing, this is going to be able to handle it. Is a machine with a legitimate non-low voltage processor going to handle those tasks better? Absolutely. And if you have something with a quad core, even better if it utilizes the quad core architecture. So it really comes down to what you plan to do. I think 95% of the population is really very well accommodated by the base model. Forget about the ones that have dedicated GPUs, which again really is for gaming. Those of you who think you're going to use it for an Edge in Adobe or AutoCAD, trust me, it's not worth the extra money, in my opinion. It's only worth the additional cash if you plan to actually game on this. Now, it can output 4K from its DisplayPort, which is here on the other side of the machine where the magnetic charging is. You can see as soon as I disconnected that, we instantly saw the screen brightness go down, and that's because I do have this at 100% brightness for your viewing pleasure. By the way, cameras on board, 5 megapixel up front. Also, Windows Hello will automatically recognize your face to unlock the machine, even though there's no fingerprint scanner on board. The camera on the back, 8 megapixels. These are some of the best onboard cameras you'll find in any laptop, Ultrabook, whatever you want to call this in the market today, much like the Surface Pro 4. And by the way, all of the internals here identical to the Surface Pro 4 except for the dedicated GPU, extra battery life, and of course, screen screen real estate, the resolution of said screen real estate, even though their pixel density is identical, and of course the physical keyboard that you're just not going to find with anything else. If I go ahead and navigate over, do a little web browsing just to show you what things look like. Again, not on my 5 gigahertz network as we've already clearly established. You can see that things just run beautifully. And that's what's nice about this machine. You're really not going to throw anything at it that's going to be an issue. Some not so great news in the world. Nothing new about that, unfortunately, these days. But everything just works exactly as you would like it to. And that's the promise of basically anything Microsoft puts out. Solid build quality and performance to back it up. And even though you can't even see the speakers that are front-facing right here in the bezel, they are quite powerful, which is a nice added bonus. See if I can play this clip right here, even though it's an ad. My microphone isn't going to pick this up incredibly well, but it certainly will give you an idea at least.
Click from the couch or grab from the shelves.
Not that I'm trying to support CNN's ads here. Going to open up another web page, and because you've got that 8 gigs of RAM, you're not going to have a problem multitasking on a machine like this. That's why the base configuration has 8 gigs of RAM to begin with. Microsoft is well aware that that's the direction you need to go in.
Also breaking tonight, a new worldwide travel alert just issued by the State Department.
And the screen's phenomenal, I have to say, even though it doesn't have the spectrum, the Adobe sRGB, Adobe RGB coverage that my Vaio Z Canvas has. It's still one of the best displays between the resolution and color accuracy and reproduction that I've seen on any machine other than my Canvas. And that is a very big compliment, in my opinion. So there you have a little bit of video, a little bit of audio. I don't want to watch too much of this. I'm not trying to promote CNN. For those of you that are curious, definitely not a paid advertisement on my behalf from anybody. If I go over to YouTube, product I've been covering lately is the Galaxy View. And I happen to like that tablet a lot. I'm going to pull up that unboxing. Let's see where I actually filter out. There it is. Yes, believe it or not, I have watched it. Well, not really watched it, but made sure that audio fidelity and everything was where it should be. Let's skip this ad.
Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick unboxing.
Jump right to what this looks like.
You're seeing the Samsung Galaxy View branding. On the left
We
side,
can pump up the resolution.
On the right side,
I would not recommend using 4K. You don't have 4K UHD resolution here in the display, but you do have close. So you want to stick with the 1440, in my opinion. That's really the optimal res for any machine display, rather, that isn't UHD capable.
appear to be either stereo speakers or ventilation right here under.
So look, this is going to do everything your laptop that you were using before will do, and do it in a form factor and fashion that may arguably be better than what you're already used to. And in terms of aesthetic, what it looks like, I have yet to really meet anyone who has said to me, you know, Ed, that's an ugly machine. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They're impressed, some awestruck. Personally, I think it's a great looking piece of hardware. Some people have complained about the fact that when it closes, and I know things are getting dark now, that, you know, there is a gap here. But in my opinion, that is irrelevant. I've already mentioned battery life being solid, and that's because it is. What I want to talk about now are bugs, because I covered most of what you really need to know about the Surface Book in my update, which some of you hopefully watched. What I want to talk about, how many of those bugs have been resolved? Because when I first got this machine, I had a wide variety of them, whether it had to do with detaching. Look at this, telling me to please resolve this before detaching. Something to do with Metal Gear Solid, Ground Zero. Not sure what the it might be running in the background. Let's see. But what I was saying was that there were issues like popping, things of that nature. I may just reboot the entire machine now. You'll see what the actual restart time is like. But popping coming off of the speakers. I also had this with the Surface Pro 4. Driver crashes constantly, especially when going to detach the tablet portion of this device. All of those things with the firmware updates have been resolved. In fact, there it's releasing this, even though we weren't waiting for the release. We wanted to see a reboot. You can see the green light now. I'm even getting a system update while I'm doing this review. What crappy timing. But this is a testament to the fact that Microsoft is putting a lot of effort into the Surface Book and making sure that this first-gen product delivers on the promise that they marketed it to actually represent. And I think that is critical because, after all, this is their first-gen laptop. I wish it was more of a laptop. That's maybe my biggest critique of the machine, is that for its price, I would have liked to have seen real CPUs in there, not low-voltage ones. I know many of you have no issue with that whatsoever, but for me personally, there's only so much I'm willing to pay in the way of design and aesthetic, and I feel like that's far more what's being paid for here in the Surface Book than the actual components themselves. And that's what reminds me of Apple. I know many of you think the keyboard reminds you of Apple, but in my opinion, the only thing that reminds me of Apple about this device is the pricing. We've somehow come to spend a price that generally would command much more powerful hardware in a package where it simply isn't there. So we're dealing with low voltage chips, the same exact internals you'll find again in the Surface Pro 4 for less money, not a lot less. The Surface Pro 4 at $1299 retail for the i5 8 gig with 256 gigs of RAM will not have a keyboard. You'll have to buy that separately or use one of your own wireless keyboards to complement it. But of course, the best option is to go with the actual Type Cover 4. After all, it's the best that they've ever made. I am going to do a fresh reboot, by the way, so you can see what it operates like without going through and installing updates while I'm filming a review here. My luck, but those of you who follow my channel know that I don't script anything. There's no copy. I'm not reading anything, so this is about as live as it's going to get without me live streaming directly. And the point is that I personally think the Surface Pro 4 is a better value. It still lives to what I think Microsoft originally intended to do, which was to change the way we compute. Here they've tried to do that again, but I still think their efforts would have been better accomplished or better received, even though this has sold incredibly well, and now I'll do the legit reboot. I think they've done incredibly well, but I would have liked to have seen more of a legitimate, straightforward real laptop as opposed to a hybrid. I feel like the hybrid already exists in the Surface Pro line, and if anything, I would have rather have seen a Surface Pro 4 that was in the 13.5 inch, a larger screen size, to give users another option, maybe a more powerful option with different chips, not just more configurations, which is much of what the new Surface line is about, more about having more options than necessarily anything else. So here we have a fresh boot. This does not boot as fast as my Vaio Z Canvas. I'll keep referencing that because that is my daily driver now, even though I'm still a very big fan of the Surface line of products, both the Book and the Pro 4. But I've made myself clear. There's no question about it. The Surface Pro 4, I think, is still where the innovation lies. I think the second gen of this product, especially if Microsoft decides to put non-low voltage processors inside a laptop of this profile, I'm not sure exactly how they'd have to engineer it, because that is one of the big coups with regard to the design here, is the engineering. I mean, everything, all of the guts, again, except for the larger battery and dedicated GPU, if you opt for it, is in the screen. And that's where some people have complained about it being top-heavy. I personally don't see that as being an issue. In terms of gaming, I've done a gaming demo. Everything plays, and that's exactly what Microsoft pretty much promised. They didn't tell you this was going to be the best gaming machine on the market, although they kind of said that. And yeah, we know updates were installed. We all just had to wait through them, including myself. But when it comes to pretty much doing just about anything, it does a good job. VLC not handling that 4K from the A7R so well. Let me play that with regular media player. And this is one of the areas where I really like the Surface Book. I don't like that the SD card slot does not allow me to fully insert the card, which means you really aren't going to be leaning on that for storage as a result, because the card will always be sticking out and possibly rip something or maybe even break the slot. I don't want to go there. It should have been flush, but this was the way they were able to accommodate it. But what is gorgeous about this is that 3000 by 2000 display is fantastic. And when you're reviewing still images that are high resolution or UHD video, like I was just showing you from the A7R Mark II, it's just a pleasure to look at. The only other machine I would compare it to, again, is the Vaio Z Canvas. Nothing really else in this class. Of course, the Surface Pro 4 does share the same characteristics of this display, but the 13.5 inches and extra resolution does go a little bit beyond what basically anything out there has to offer, even the Z Canvas that I keep complimenting throughout the course of this video. So there's a lot to like here. Again, solid battery life, good performance when it comes to the processor. I would say good performance from the dedicated GPU, but again, not worth the extra money unless you must have gaming in a form factor like this, which if you really must have gaming, you probably should be looking at a gaming notebook or laptop. But I see the appeal. You know, it's trying to get the best of both worlds. And then when it comes to detaching, which now I should be able to do, let's see if it allows me. I don't think we'll have any conflict. Now it says ready to detach. This is an area where, you know, there used to be problems when I would detach this. We'd get a driver crash, the screen would go black. I'm still having a Wi-Fi problem, but it's my network. It is not anything to do with the Surface. I can assure you of that. The Surface Book is not having a Wi-Fi issue, because even my Vaio Z Canvas that I'm using to record this on right now, I had to switch over to 2.4 gigahertz as well. But really incredible what they did with the engineering here, that this machine is so thin, so lightweight for its size, you know, for a 13.5-inch form factor. Does it get hot? Yes. Does it get loud? Not as loud as you might think for what it's able to accomplish. But when I look at the engineering here, I can't help, and again, excuse that it's dark, but the purpose was to give you a low light look at this machine. I can't help but imagine what the next gen of Surface Pro could look like, and especially Surface Book. By the way, the battery that's inside this, when we're working separately, a lot of people say 2 to 3 hours. You're lucky if you get 2 hours. You can charge it independently with the exact same cord that I'm using here. It'll plug right in. So if you do want to stay in tablet mode, you easily can. You can charge it on its own individually. And also when docked, the batteries do charge up separately. They don't charge simultaneously. Keep that in mind. The first battery that it's going to charge is the one I believe that's in the keyboard, because after all, that is the primary battery. If we look right now, you'll see that this is the battery is not available. That's because that battery that's not available is the one in the keyboard with the dedicated GPU. This one, on the other hand, has just about a full charge. I remove this, screen brightness gets dimmed instantly. In terms of using this for inking, because of course the pen is part of the experience, they've done a lot with that. More control now with the actual button at the top, whether you want to summon Cortana, OneNote. The inking definitely much better. When you're writing on here, much more tactile feel. I'm not going to say that it feels like paper, but definitely more intuitive than previous generations. You now also have the options to get different tips to give you even more of a finite and precise inking experience. I do find that the inking tracking is faster on my Vaio Z Canvas, but that's because it's got a quad-core, even though it's Haswell Intel processor, which simply destroys everything in the Ultrabook low voltage category when it comes to something like this. But otherwise, the inking update that Microsoft integrated here is fantastic. And we do also have the ability to magnetically now attach this, not here like on the Surface Pro 4, but along the side of the actual Surface Book itself. So that's another nice thing. Keep in mind, though, if you do that and put this in a bag, there's a good chance that the Surface, the pen for the Surface Book, or Surface Pro 4 for that matter, could get a little bit mashed, rubbing against its own magnetic slot, essentially, or magnetic strip, and that's not a great thing. I think that's one of those things that Microsoft came up with a better idea than previous gen, but maybe didn't think it through completely. Also, with regard to inking, as I try to get this plugged back in, and I almost have it, but don't quite, something else I want to bring up is, reversing this, because ideally, you're not going to be inking on this in the fashion that I just was showing you. You're going to flip it around and connect it to the dock like so, and now be using it in this capacity as I accidentally shut it off. I mean, that is more likely going to be the capacity that you're going to want to use this. I don't know if I have rotation off. It looks like I do, but this is where you're going to, more easily be able to write. Of course, palm rejection is there. That's not going to be an issue, but something to note is that if you actually try to ink on this in any of the fixed positions of the hinge, the screen is simply not going to be steady. So you're definitely going to want to keep it in this position for inking, or remove it completely from the Surface Book altogether. So let me go ahead and flip this around so we're looking at it from the proper perspective. Basically what it comes down to is that if you are looking for, again, a very unique product, something that there are a lot of different hybrids that try to do what the Surface Book does, but none do it as well as the Surface Book. With that said, does it mean that the Surface Book is right for you? Well, if budget is not an issue, then I highly recommend the machine, because all of the bugs that I've experienced have been fixed, from speaker popping to driver issues, as I mentioned earlier. They're gone. Battery life, I wish was a little bit better. Believe it or not, everyone bragging about incredible battery life, it's not that much better than the Surface Pro 4. Do keep in mind, though, the bigger screen is a much bigger battery suck than the 12.3-inch lower res, even though same pixel density display you get with the Surface Pro 4 line. So I wish battery life was a little bit better, but that is a very minor, not even complaint, just something I have to point out. Full disclosure, it's not going to be the 12 hours that Microsoft is claiming. Maybe it is on video playback with 25% brightness, but I tend to live in 75 to 100% brightness. Not everyone does. You can now see both batteries are charging, but battery 1 is the one that specifically is getting the charging first. Even though they both say and charging, the battery 1 is really what drives the entire machine. That is the larger of the two batteries. After all, remember I told you that the battery in the tablet portion only nets you about an hour and a half to 2 at best. And you can see we're actually getting an estimate right here for how long it's going to take until the machine is topped off. So overall, the Surface Book, definitely innovative. If I was going to go with one personally, it would be the base model at $14.99, because you're already paying a steep premium for this, what I would call innovative, but not groundbreaking, earth-shattering, game-changing design. After all, the Transformer from Asus years ago integrated this sort of concept of being able to, go from tablet to clamshell design very easily with a mechanical option like this. So this is nothing new. It's more of how Microsoft went about designing it, how they were able to fit so much capability into such a thin profile. I can't say the machine is so light, because the reality is that it isn't that light at the end of the day. The mechanical unlocking of the keyboard from the tablet portion does concern me slightly. I wonder if over time it could become an issue. But, issues happen with everything under the sun when it comes to technology, so that wouldn't be specific just to the Surface Book. Also, keep in mind that this does get locked into position when the machine is detached. You're not going to be able to move the actual hinge here. So that's something you should be aware of. Not that I would see any reason that you would need to, but for those of you that are curious or are wondering, that simply isn't going to happen when the machine, it's basically off in a sense. The keyboard is completely shut down at that point. So great typing experience on the keyboard, great tablet experience, although very limited by battery life, best-in-class display, best-in-class cameras, and really something that it's very difficult to find anything to complain about other than its pricing. That really is the truth of the Surface Book. And next generation, I can only imagine what Microsoft's going to do. Again, I hope that we see more ports and not the need to lean on something like a hub like they've made the docking system, which is backwards compatible, definitely a nice thing. But there are a lot of solutions like that, like the Kensington SD4000 that I have here, which I'll also be doing a video on with this, just to show you an example that there are other docking options other than Microsoft's, and they are less expensive. Are they as good? That's a question for another video altogether. But overall, the Surface Book is definitely one of the best products on the market right now. Its sales reflect that. Whether or not it's right for you, again, comes down to how in love with this you really are, because you are absolutely paying for that lust. No question about it. In the same way that Apple users have been forking out incredible premiums for Apple products, despite performance and internal hardware not being any different than their PC counterparts. So ironic that Microsoft, the king of the PC software world, going in that direction, but not really. They want to make money, and they know that PC makers haven't been able to challenge Apple the way that they have in the form of the Surface Pro line, and now here in their first laptop, the Surface Book. So I look forward to second gen. Already really like the first gen, so I can only imagine what's on the horizon. I expect we'll have a 4K display next year. Let's hope an OLED, although I doubt it, just for margin's sake for Microsoft. And again, some real processors, some legitimate mobile chips that are not low voltage, even if that means getting slightly heavier, a little bit larger, even though generally things get smaller with more innovation. I think that would be a route to Microsoft making the higher end, the $2,000 to $3,000 models far more saleable, whereas right now there's a reason the $1,499 model was the quickest to sell out among the entire Surface Book lineup. But hopefully you all enjoyed the video. Again, it's a stellar machine. It's just incredibly expensive, and I think there are so many options out there right now, including its sibling, the Surface Pro 4, that for many users is going to be more than enough. In fact, the better option if really what you're after is a hybrid experience, because at the end of the day, this is still a hybrid and not a laptop. Like I said, you're missing ports, you're missing elements that would really round it out to make it compete with other laptops, not just Apple products that, in my opinion, are in many ways stymied right out of the gate, simply because that's the standard that Apple has set for many years now, and their consumers have been cultured to embrace, not just accept. So the Surface Book, great piece of hardware, overpriced, absolutely. The second gen, I expect to be amazing. Come on, Microsoft, bring us some real processors. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.